In an effort to bring zero cost to consumer information to the general public, in that spirit, I would like to thank our sponsors for today. Our first sponsor for today is EvoScent. EvoScent is the signature luxury line of fragrances created by award-winning master and veteran perfumer Ramon Bejar in collaboration with EvoRich Group of companies. The EvoScent collection of 8 bespoke, crafted and unisex fragrances called The Highest is now available on the EvoScent website for purchase at a price of $150. However, there's a limited time promotion going on, so use the code HEGYREX4 during checkout and you only have to pay a flat worldwide shipping fee of $25 instead of $150. Buy now using the link in the description below. And now, back to the show. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Mr. Rohan Menon.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Okay, now, before we get into it, let me just educate our audience about the things that you've done in just purely in terms of your education. So you completed your 12th in science from Fergusson College in Pune. Then you went to the University of Washington to do your bachelor's in biology. After that, you pursued your master's from the University of Sheffield in human and molecular genetics. And even after that, you went to Sweden and finished your PhD
I just started my PhD.
Okay, you've just started.
Yeah.
Sorry, my bad. PhD in chemical ecology from the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences, which is in Alnarp, Sweden.
Yeah.
I hope I got everything right. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, let's just start where you are right now, since you're pursuing your PhD in chemical ecology. Could you just tell us a little bit about that?
Okay. So the field of chemical ecology relates to how organisms interact with the world around them. I'm looking specifically at mosquitoes. So it's insect chemical ecology. And for mosquitoes, they mostly interact with the world through their sense of smell, which is the olfactory system. My project is looking at one specific species of mosquitoes called the Culex Pipiens mosquitoes. I won't go into too much detail, but there are 2 types of the Culex Pipiens. One is called Culex Pipiens. I'm just going to call it Pipiens from now on. That feeds mostly on birds. And there is another one called Culex Pipiens molestus. I'm going to call it molestus. That feeds mainly on humans. They do have some more genetic and behavioral differences, but the feeding patterns are very interesting. And for a long time, they've been separated, living in different habitats in different parts of the world. And my project is looking at how, because of human interaction, changing environments, these 2 separated types are coming together and forming hybrids that can feed on both humans and birds. The natural problem with this is that they carry diseases from birds to humans, and the Culex Pipiens mosquitoes specifically, they are a disease vector for a disease called the West Nile virus, which is one of the most popular insect-borne diseases. And over the past 10 years across Europe, because my project looks specifically at Europe, the incidence of cases and fatalities for something like the West Nile virus has increased. Why these mosquitoes choose to feed on either birds or humans, we don't quite know. Unlike the Anopheles, which transmits like malaria and Aedes, another very popular species, not much research has been done on Culex Pipiens. So it is my goal to basically study these mosquitoes and ask the question, why do you feed on whoever you choose to feed? Our hypothesis is that we believe there is a genetic component to it, one that we can identify and study more to see whether, if there are any changes, how does that affect the mosquito? Can we use this knowledge to curb the number of cases of West Nile virus? So, where I currently stand, I just started about 6 months ago. I'm still setting up my entire process. So yeah, hopefully in the next 4 years, I find something interesting that can help the world, I guess.
So to an average person or to an outsider, it would be a little confusing as to why you chose mosquitoes. But little do most people know that in fact mosquitoes are the deadliest animal
Yes.
in in right now, at least if not in existence,
Yeah.
because a lot of people die due to diseases related to mosquitoes, like you said, the Anopheles and malaria. It might not be so prevalent in our country or in the developed countries.
The number of fatalities, definitely, yeah. The good thing that I think over the past, 20 so years is more knowledge and awareness has spread about mosquitoes and malaria specifically. I think the Gates Foundation's done a lot of work in Africa to, providing nets, providing knowledge and resources to people to fight these diseases. But yeah, the mosquitoes still remain one of the most dangerous animals out there. So, and of course, because we're going through COVID, I think the fact that now any potential disease is still a specter in everybody's minds. It's an interesting and very promising field of study, definitely.
How did you choose this particular very niche, I would say?
Yeah.
Or did you not have an option, or just one thing led to another?
So I didn't specifically go out looking for it. After I finished my master's, just to give a bit of a background, after I did my undergrad, I took a year off and I worked at a research lab in Bangalore at the National Center for Biological Sciences. It's one of the best research places in India, and the professor that I was working under, he's easily one of the smartest people I've ever met, one of India's best scientists, and he had some connections in Sweden because he had taught in Sweden previously, and he's been a mentor of sorts. I've really gone to him for advice and help, and after I finished my master's, I came back to India. This was because of COVID and quarantine and everything, and he emailed me about this project and said there was an opening. It looked very interesting. It covered a lot of fields that I wanted to study, but I was unsure about whether I should go for it. I was always interested in things like evolutionary biology, and this project specifically is looking both at the organisms from a behavioral standpoint as well as a molecular thing, which is a very holistic way of, looking at a problem, which I really liked. And the place and the people who I'm working under are some of the best in the field, and this project actually is a project that's done in collaboration with the Max Planck group in Germany. They've formed a consortium called the Max Planck Next Generation Insect Chemical Ecologists, where the established professors are trying to build the next generation of scientists to kind of but to pass on the knowledge, and to work under such distinguished scientists is a very interesting thing to me. So I applied. I didn't really expect to get in because I don't have, unlike a lot of the people who I work along, I don't have the background with mosquitoes or insects in general. But I was selected, so yeah, mosquitoes. I have an interesting story about mosquitoes as well, but we can cover that later.
I think, please go ahead and we can cover that right now.
I don't know if you believe in karma or whatever, but...
Definitely do believe in karma.
My great-grandfather, so you've met my grandmom, right? Her father was an entomologist, and he studied mosquitoes. So, yeah.
So, you might be an incarnation of your great.
I don't know about that, but the way we joked about it, that some mosquito bit him really hard, and now I'm also studying mosquitoes. And one of the reasons they moved to Pune was because of the job. And
okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know this.
Yeah, it's something we actually did a lot more research about after I got the position, because
it wouldn't have come up generally when we were talking.
And my grandmother got really excited. She found the paper that he had published about mosquitoes, and it's a nice thing to show off from time to time. But,
so now, if this opportunity hadn't come along, which I'm glad, and I think it was destined or bound to come along, where do you think you would have been? Like, would you still have pursued your PhD? And if yes, what would you naturally gravitate to? Like, which theses or which subject?
That's a good question. Yes, I would have liked to continue my PhD. I don't know where, but fields of interest for me are evolutionary biology, as I mentioned before. It's just a nice way of looking at things over time and seeing how organisms kind of react to an ever-changing world, which I find pretty interesting. Thanks to my master's, I did a more human-focused study. And the University of Sheffield and the program that I was with, they had a tie-up with the Sheffield Children's Hospital, and doing the cancer research and stuff. So that was always very interesting. And cancer research is one of those, a lot of money, a lot of opportunities to study. So yeah, I would definitely do a PhD. I don't know specifically it would have been in the field of chemical ecology, but something something that would require me to sit in a lab, because that's the kind of stuff I like.
So now talk us through what your, average routine or daily life looks like right now, like when you're in Sweden right now.
So the good news about my position in Sweden is that, unlike most PhD positions that rely on a stipend, I'm technically considered an employee of the university, so I get paid a salary. And part of that includes that I might have to do some teaching later on, and I have other benefits and other requirements that I need to complete. So at the moment, I have classes that I have to complete. I have my research. I have some other writing and stuff as part of my PhD program. Today is Monday, right? Yeah, so every Monday morning I have lab meeting at 9 o'clock. I'm usually in the lab from 9 to 5, even though I don't need to be. The good thing about being a scientist in my field is that I have a lot more freedom in dictating how I wish to spend my 40 or so hours a week. Obviously, most of the time it does extend that, but I have, depending on what needs to be done, whether there are any experiments, whether I have any meetings or classes, I'm a lot more control over that. So, but usually I stick to about 9 o'clock. I get done by around 5 or 6. I live on campus, so I don't have to commute that much. And I should exercise more, but the good thing about being in Sweden is that, and especially staying where I live in a small town area, is that I have a bicycle, and even to get groceries or to go to the nearest town, I need to cycle, fairly regularly. So I get a little bit of exercise. And for the moment, I've been a bit of a homebody, and I need to travel and get out more. But I think next summer, when I plan to do field trials, either in different parts of Sweden or looking at different places in Europe, that's when I will be going out and doing a lot more. But for now, it's just set up, prep for the experiment, and then, take it from there.
Okay. So there's a two-part question.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you usually get your grants from?
Mm-hmm.
And in your particular case, where is where are the finances for the study coming from?
That is a very good question that all scientists kind of grapple with. At the moment, I am not reliant on any grants. Most of my funding comes through the Max Planck Foundation, so they pay for the first 3 years, and then because I'm an employee of the university, they will pay for my employment for the last year of my PhD. But as I'm always encouraged to apply for more grants, because then that opens up so many more possibilities for my research. A lot of it does come from, I think in Sweden specifically, there are a lot of foundations and organizations that do open up to certain fields and certain kinds of study. I do not know the specifics. Unfortunately, I'm still very much at the beginning phase, so I haven't written a grant proposal just yet. But I know in Sweden, a lot of it does come from a lot of wealthy donors. So I think Sweden has one of the highest number of wealthy donors who specifically give money for sciences, which is pretty good. I think when you look at places like the US, it's mostly like government grants and stuff that you get. If you look in India, I think also government grants. The Department of Biotechnology, I know for Bangalore at least, they've been doing a lot. So yeah, at the moment I am reliant solely on the Max Planck.
How does one get affiliated with the Max Planck Institution?
So this is primarily because of the position that they had. They all kind of formed this new consortium, and therefore they were advertising this position. And the Max Planck is a very good research institute anyway in Germany, and they've got different places in Germany where they focus on different studies, not just biology, but sciences in general. So yeah, if you're a PhD student or a master's student, I think they have programs open if you need to apply for.
Is it very well known?
Oh yeah.
Like outside, like in your circle maybe, but to a person who...
No, the Max Planck name itself is one of the big names in sciences. So they are one of the better places in Germany to do your academics for.
So now, since you did your bachelor's in the States,
yeah,
and you did your master's in
I've
the UK,
traveled around.
And now you're currently pursuing your PhD in Sweden.
Where next? I don't know.
Where next? Not even that. Like what I was gonna ask you is, which is the place that you like the most, or like, and why? Or I'll make it easier for you.
No, I know. I wish there was an easy answer for this. Doing an undergrad itself was a very special experience, and I did spend 4 years in Seattle, and I love Seattle. Seattle's a great place. If I get a chance to go back there, they've got a good chemical ecology program there, so postdoc hopefully. But yeah, Seattle's a great place. I was also at Seattle at a very interesting time when Trump got re-elected. So seeing that shift in dynamics was also very interesting. Unfortunately, I spent half the year in Sheffield doing things, and then 2020 hit. I was stuck in my room for the next half thanks to COVID. So I don't have a good answer for Sheffield. Sheffield is a beautiful city, but I didn't really do much, so I can't. I'm not sure how much I can advocate it. And I've only been 6 months in Sweden, but I really like Sweden. I like the place that I'm in. It's very quiet. The people are very warm once you start talking to them, and very helpful. So ask me after 4 years, I'll give you a different answer, I guess. But yeah, I'm fortunate to be in very good places and have good people surrounding me to help me out.
So what are the this slightly lengthy question.
Yeah.
If you had to say,
yeah, so tell me if I'm going on too long.
No. As in, your answer is not lengthy. What I'm going to ask you is a little lengthy. So what are the major differences in these three places?
Mm-hmm.
And what is the one thing that you like or found most interesting about the place, and what is the one thing that you probably disliked?
It's hard to really compare, my undergrad to my PhD, because I come in with a different mindset. I have different requirements that I need to do. But to answer your question, Seattle is a good place. It's a large city, so you've got a lot more things to do. There are a lot more people, a lot more opportunities to explore. Being an undergrad student, I think one of the downsides for me is there are a lot of people and a lot of requirements that you have to take for your class. So there were a lot of classes that I wish I had taken, or I wish I'd known more about, but due to time or lack of space or whatever, I was unable to do that. But I really love my time in Seattle. I would advocate it as one really good college. The Department of Biology is especially one of the best in the world, really, for any kind of biological studies. So, and they've got a great medical program as well. So yeah, I went in sort of not knowing everything, and Seattle was a great place to explore a different side of things as one does in college. It's a great place to meet a lot of people. It's a very international university. So I met a lot more people than I normally would have if I stayed in Pune. Sheffield's very similar in that way. I don't really know. Again, I'm not advocating Sheffield primarily because I kind of spent half the year in my room. But I will say that in the year I spent in my room, I had some really good professors. They managed to adapt to COVID and the struggles that we had, and sort of helped me get through my master's, even though I was struggling quite a bit. So definitely a great advantage. Some really good people there. The downside to Sheffield, it is one of the smaller-ish towns. So if you like, clubbing or partying and all, maybe it's not the best place for that kind of stuff. So yeah, adjust accordingly. Sweden's like a different mindset altogether. The people are more reserved. They're friendly, but more reserved. They do speak English, so it's very good, but knowing Swedish is a big benefit, and I have been taking Swedish classes. So I guess the downside is that adjusting to a culture that is quite different from, I would say, what India is might be a bit problematic for people. But sort of the independence and the natural beauty of actually in a lot of places is just a good thing to walk around and view. I've only been there 6 months, and it's easily, if I could find another place after my PhD to work at in Sweden, I would love to stay there. So.
Okay. Very well put. Now let's go back to the beginning a little bit.
Sure.
So for those who are watching, we've known each other for I think 15 years.
Yeah,
because we've been through school the entire while, and I think you went to Ferguson for 11th and 12th in science.
Yes.
Yeah. So was this, obviously this entire journey wasn't planned at all.
Yeah.
But even I took 11th and 12th in science, but now we're doing wildly different things and in wildly different places. When was it that you knew, Rohan, that
Oh,
biology?
I'm going to give a bad answer for this.
Okay.
Okay, I should preface this. I did 11th and 12th in Ferguson because at that time I did the the IIT tutorial classes and stuff. Not that I wanted to really go to IIT and all, but it's just a significant investment of time, and because Ferguson is a lot more relaxed about stuff like attendance and stuff, that's why I chose Ferguson. In hindsight, not a good idea, but yeah, you live and learn. I was always interested in biology, I think ever since school. What really got me on track to evolutionary biology, or just sort of that entire field, was a book that I borrowed from my cousin called The Greatest Show on Earth. It is written by Richard Dawkins, who is by trade an evolutionary biologist, and this book sort of chronicles the changes that a lot of organisms go through, and his manner of style and the way he sort of explains some of the more dense concepts in a really engaging way. That's what caught my eye. And I was always sort of biologically, inclined in terms of sciences ever since I was a kid, because I was a dinosaur kid growing up. I collected those Animal Planet things. I just loved animals, and going to school and realizing that, you can actually do a lot more with it, and there's something called genes that you could study, and then there's genetics, evolution, blah blah blah. I was always I always wanted to do something. I never knew where to do it. It was always, that's the kind of thing I wanted to do. I was the guy who saw a guy in a lab coat and was like, that's cool. But I think it was only after, this is ninth standard, I was very fortunate to go to the US in the summer vacation of my ninth standard. And I have an uncle who lives in Seattle, and we saw the University of Washington's campus, and I just kind of fell in love with the entire thing. And I hadn't really decided I was going to go there, but I just realized that if I wanted to do the kind of things that I wanted to do, that's what I need to be. So 11th and 12th, I also kind of studied for the SATs, did all of that. And so then I reached UW. The more I learned, the more classes I took, the more I realized how much I didn't know and how much more there was to study. And sort of bit by bit, the more I learned, the more people I spoke to. The professor I mentioned before in Bangalore, who's been a really good mentor, he helped me showed me a new path that not just the classes will give you a certain thing, but the actual hands-on experience in a lab is a different thing altogether. And the knowledge he helped me sort of gain is immensely valuable. I don't know whether I will continue in this field. I don't know if I will continue in biology after 4 years, because the field of academia is not not in a good place right now. But it's going to be an interesting journey, I guess.
Why do you say that it's not a good place right now?
So there are two major reasons that I can think of at the moment. One is the way academia is structured right now, and secondly, it is the sort of the day-to-day PhD student issues. In terms of the way it's structured right now, there aren't that many positions open for people who complete their PhD and want to stay in the field of academia. A lot of the older, more prestigious professor roles are currently occupied by the older generation who've been there about 20, 30 years. And we as in the world keeps producing a lot more PhDs now than there aren't enough positions available. And the pay is not that great. You rely entirely almost on grants. And if you aren't studying something interesting, for example, stuff like cancer research is going to get a lot more money than studying some random plant in the middle of nowhere. So it's an unfortunate situation where a lot of good scientists are kind of forced to move away from a really good academic position. But I don't know, hopefully things will change in the future. And the second issue that I mentioned is the day-to-day PhD things. I'm fortunate where I'm considered an employee of the university, so I get like a fixed salary. Most PhD students rely on stipends and grants. That's also a lot of competition to get a single grant, and PhD students aren't paid very well. So naturally, people gravitate to moving to industry. And with industry, you do get a stable life, but what I why I'm not that fond of it is that there you lose a lot of independence in terms of what you want to study, because you're always kind of consumer focused, so you have different people to answer to and different things to worry about. So yeah, it's I don't know if and when things will change. Like I said, I'm hopeful that they will, but it's going to require a significant overhaul of a lot of structures, not just in India, but in the world in general.
Okay, I hate bringing this up,
Yeah.
because it's related to COVID and the pandemic, and it's been overdone, and everybody talks about it, and we all know. But I think this is an important and relevant question. So you already mentioned that academia has been one place or sector or industry where a lot of grants are heavily concentrated in a certain field, right?
Yeah.
How do you think COVID has impacted, if it has, and to what extent? And do you think that this is a short term, like a tunnel vision kind of a thing, where maybe just for the next 5 years, companies or individuals that are offering grants will focus more on things related to this? Or do you think that this is something that is going to stay for at least for the next 5 or 10 years?
That's a good question. I don't think it's a short-term thing. It's this will kind of smooth over. But yeah, a lot of money has been diverted to COVID or COVID-related fields of research. And as somebody who does something from, a more natural sciences kind of thing, rather than a purely medical field, I know people who've kind of complained about this kind of thing, where a lot of funding, not just funding actually, but even lab resources like gloves and pipette tips, and just a lot of it's being diverted to, medical research, and we're just kind of struggling to pick up the pieces with whatever we have. I don't think it's a permanent shift, because I trust the science, as corny as that sounds. I do think we will get over it, but there are a lot more things in the future that we will have to worry about in terms of medical issues. The most pressing being the so-called superbug, which is antibiotic-resistant bacteria. That's always been the big thing, and what COVID has essentially shown us is that we do not have the resources to sort of handle these large-scale medical issues and we can't adapt very quickly. And even if we do want to, a lot of people just aren't very receptive to it. So it's going to be interesting to see how the shift turns after COVID becomes less of an issue. I don't know if we will have the same amounts of money going back to the other parts of science, but it's always been hard. It's going to get harder still for these kinds of sciences. And if you're like a humanities or arts PhD, it's become practically impossible. So it's disappointing, but yeah, I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you, I still think there's hope, and I really like what you mentioned earlier. It is the more I learned, and then I discovered that's how much I don't know.
Yeah.
So we don't even know what we don't know. And that's the beauty of science,
Yeah.
We never know, something might connect to another thing, and they could be totally two unrelated things. And I think you'd know better exactly what I'm talking about. Where you mentioned, like, maybe it's nothing that's life-saving or even related to humans, but maybe the study of a plant in a desert could lead to another discovery, and one thing leads to another. So could you maybe give an example that you remember at the top of your head, in the field of science, where a discovery, has had unintended applications or an unintended impact in a great or a positive manner?
I mean, I guess to use one of the most popular current scientific discoveries is CRISPR. CRISPR, when people studied it back in the early 90s or whatever, it was just random microbes that people found, oh wow, these guys take genes from here to there, they integrate it into their own genome. That's pretty interesting. We'll see how it goes. It's only after decades of research we realized that, wow, this can actually be used in so many more ways, and develop a system to control and not just control it, but to adapt it to whatever situation we need it. That I don't think many people realized how powerful a tool it could be. And this is just one of these things. If you want to look at non-biological sciences, you have tons of material sciences for battery technology, for example. We didn't realize that we could do so much more, but now lithium batteries kind of run the world, and now we're moving on to solar energy, and that's tons of innovations there that people thought, hey, this is kind of cool. And I guess that's science in a nutshell. But yeah, looking for a marketable product out of your research is a bit short-sighted. There is so much more that you can explore beyond that, and I don't want to like put anybody off, getting money by doing whatever they do. But there's so much more out there. There's so much more that you might not even realize now, but as other technologies develop, it can be adapted to. So yeah, good question. Yeah.
Since you've done such wildly different, not widely, but like if you go to another person in the same field and you tell them that you've done your bachelor's in this place from here and then your master's.
Surprisingly common, actually.
Oh,
yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think very few people I know who choose one thing and kind of stick to it. One of the biggest things that you learn in science is that a lot of knowledge is never lost, really. What you can take from one place, you can kind of bring a new perspective into a new subject, and that will help you become a better scientist in a new way. And yeah, I don't think I'm alone in the way I've kind of moved around. So yeah, it's I don't think anybody's been hard and fast only X, Y, and Z and stayed with that way. And if you are, I think you are missing out on kind of widening your perspective and learning a lot more that you might not initially know about.
In fact, it was, I think, Elon Musk who described this, and he calls it first principles thinking.
Okay.
Where I'm actually quite surprised that you don't know this. So he said that it is very easy to get started even in a field that is new to you, because all you have to do is study the fundamentals, and not only study the fundamentals but try and apply the same principles that you've learned from different fields that could be totally unrelated as well. Anyway, the question I was getting to was, what are the major fundamental differences and similarities in your bachelor's, master's, and PhD, since it's ultimately related to biology?
Good question. For my undergrad, I sort of went wide in terms of my focus. The good thing about evolutionary biology is that you study sort of the principles and processes that govern a lot of different things, regardless of the nitty-gritties of how each individual behaves. You look at a population rather than an individual. And I went into that because also I didn't really know what I wanted to do. This gave me a good excuse to try out a lot of different things. And for my master's, it was more human cell focused. The human cell is obviously a lot more complex than a lot of microbes. So there are a lot more processes involved, but the same things, the same basic scientific principles still stand. So I guess the best answer I can give you is that the individual organism that I've been studying has changed, but the core principles have always been the same. The biology doesn't change just because you move from a human to a mosquito to an elephant, for example. So.
Okay, and I know you mentioned when I asked you that you are not sure of where you're going to be after you're done with your PhD. Yes. But this is a question that I ask everyone who comes on the show. Mm-hmm. Given, let's say if money was no issue, if you had unlimited money, and if you could choose any place in the world to do anything that you want, where and what would Rohan Menon be doing, let's say even 5 years, 10 years, or 20 years?
It's a horrible thing to ask me, because my first reaction is that I would sit at home and do nothing. But, okay, assume I had to work. I would... So wait,
are you saying, Rohan, that if you didn't have to work... Okay, you know what, let's go there. Because, as much as we like to show people and think that we're noble creatures who like to work, if most people were given the choice of not working a day in their life, they wouldn't. So what would you do, Rohan, if you didn't have to work? We'll get to when if you had to work.
So that's it's a very loaded question, but I'll kind of break it down. If I had enough finances where I could help out the people I need to, so I can take care of my family, I can donate, if I can start a grant for my own to help kind of some scientists, that'd be great. But I'm a very low maintenance person. You just give me a good internet connection, I'll be fine. So I don't really have a lot of things that I need to check off my bucket list. I've been fortunate where I've been able to travel a lot in the world. So I guess I always kind of take it as a given that regardless of whether I had the funds or not, I would always find a way to travel and have new experiences that way. In terms of material gains, I don't know if I have anything specific that I would like to buy. Things that I would like to buy aren't really, it's not a problem of the finances, it's just, PS5s aren't in stock. I'm joking.
I think if you have enough money, you can buy the company or find a way to get your hands on a PS5. You can get it on the second-hand market.
Yeah,
for
but
like
I'm not going to
the
pay
price.
some scalpel.
Yeah, exactly. So if you had enough money, you would have.
No, I wouldn't. I still, to prove a point. But
Okay.
no, I'm just joking about that. But I guess my point is that I don't really have that much material stuff that I would like. It would be mostly using the money for something good to help others in whatever way that I can. And I don't know, I'll just, sit at home, try and find something to do. If I was working at a university still and doing research, that would be a great thing to do. I'm not particularly worried about where, because, like I said before, I'm pretty low maintenance. I can work wherever. Yeah, it's such a sad answer for such a good question, but yeah, I don't know. I guess I wouldn't use the money for myself as much as to help enable other people and make sure that I can take care of whoever needs help.
Okay.
So,
if you thought that answer was sad, if somebody asked me the same question, my answer would be sad too. Because I can relate to you, and we're kind of similar in that way, that low maintenance and not a lot of materialistic things. Anyway, I'm glad you mentioned this, because this is the tangent that I wanted to take the podcast into. You have been going for a few classes that I find very interesting. So could you just tell us a bit about the classes that you've been going to?
I'm gonna need some context. What classes?
The one that we were discussing before.
Oh, right. Yeah, so when I was in Pune, there is the Vedanta Academy that they used to hold sort of kids classes for, spreading the teachings of Swami Parthasarathi and his idea of Vedanta. And later on, I think my mom used to go for those Bhagavad Gita classes. And just growing up, spirituality has always kind of been a thing at home. I've been interested. I never really, at one point in time, I was very, into it. But as time kind of goes on, I've had the opportunity to read more and experience things that from an outside perspective. So it's given me a lot of clarity in terms of what I want to think about, what I want to read. But those classes were really useful in just helping me become aware of something that I think that most people don't really think about until a certain age in life. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey, I guess.
Could you give us a little brief about what they taught you at the class?
Okay, Vedanta, for people who don't know, is the literal translation is the end of the Vedas. There are certain chapters of the Vedas that focus on more the spirituality side of things, and the Swami Parthasarathi, he has, I'm not 100% sure about who he studied under and stuff, but he has transcribed and has taught these things in Pune and in different parts of India for quite a while. And I don't quite remember how I got into it. I think some family member kind of recommended that. But we used to go as children and do these classes every Sunday morning. A lot of the ideas were focused mainly on the idea of the self. As he describes it, you can just kind of split the body into the body, the mind, and the intellect. And each one is a certain component of what makes a human a human. And the idea of Vedanta being is that people have sort of lost the way, if there is such a thing as a way, and to develop your intellect, the analytical portion of your mind, to think, reason, and judge, and sort of approach life in a better way as compared to being just thrown to the whims of your emotions and the whims of others. So as a child, it's a very interesting idea. It's also very hard to keep a child sitting in place for an hour to listen to something like that. But it's definitely enlightening. The books that he has written are very interesting to read. And it's definitely had a good impact on my life, I'd say.
Okay. Out of all the things that were taught, or that rather that you learned there, what were some of the most eye-opening or things that really resonate with you even today?
It's been a while, so I can't really remember, proper phrases and stuff. But I guess the idea of sort of controlling, or I don't want to use the word center, but using the analytical portion of your mind, as they call it, the intellect, to sort of guide you throughout life. There's nothing wrong with being in touch with your emotions and being a human being, but to not let it overpower you, to not be completely throwing yourself into something just because you feel like doing something. And being the quiet sort of kid, it's nice to hear that and kind of think about stuff like that. And yeah, I guess that would be the most interesting thing. I'm sorry, I don't remember that much about it, but yeah, it's very interesting stuff.
Okay, now on the flip side, we're human beings, right, as you
Yes.
mentioned, and we are not necessarily, we're not good followers of what we're told, right? We're rebels by
Yes.
nature. Now, over the course of your lifetime, you've read a lot of things, you've learned a lot of things. What are some of the things that you disagree with at maybe something that you've learned in the class? And why is that?
Ooh, that's how inflammatory do I want to be? No, I'm kidding. I guess the idea is that a lot of what they say is reliant on very old literature that has gone through not just word of mouth from teacher to student, but also many years of translation from Sanskrit to Hindi to English to other languages and stuff. My biggest thing with anything that old is the person who translates it usually does have some sort of bias, some sort of issue. So when they talk about stuff like, desire being a certain thing, that humans need to be a certain way to minimize desire in one's life, and I don't know, this kind of rubs me off the wrong way. I'm not saying that it's completely wrong. I do not want to give a qualitative judgment of what is right and wrong, but it does seem the way they kind of market it is that a lot of it is, this is one way to do things. I don't know if it is the right way, and try as I might. Obviously, I'm not trying very hard, but it's not worked out for me in certain situations in life. But they do have some good stuff, and a lot of it does make sense. But I think over time, enough things have changed over the past how many ever years that the core concepts still hold, but kind of everything else about it seems iffy.
No, I completely agree with you that especially these texts, and when it's this, when knowledge is passed through disciplic succession, as you very rightly said, and I 100% agree with you that biases creep in and it gets distorted, and it's people's intentions are not always pure.
It's not just a question of intentions. It's this.
The message, what I'm trying to say is the message can be twisted.
Right? Not just twisted, but that's kind of my. I was also very fortunate that I took a lot of philosophy classes in part of my academics, and one of the things you realize is that perspective and being an observer means you kind of view things in a different way, and that adds its own lens to what might be distorting a quote unquote objective truth. And even though you might not want to add your own biases or to change it in a certain way, things do inevitably change. The fact that certain things are written in a certain language using certain words, intonations, everything, that does mean that something is lost when you do that. And I don't want to be too negative and say that this person has some sort of bias behind it or they want to push an agenda or whatever, but I think a lot of these ideas have stood the test of time because there are certain components that are definitely worthy of listening to, but I don't know how ardently you'd need to follow it, and how much sort of truth to power you need to give to those certain texts. So
Okay.
yeah, it's just to put it as nicely as I can.
Okay. My next question is slightly on the heavier side.
Right.
Okay. Now you're someone who's we studied in a Christian school.
Yes.
And we grew up. Our houses were St. Francis, St. Paul's.
I
and
still
St.
remember
Peter.
those.
Yeah, and we probably know more songs and hymns than the average Christian person, and we're born in a predominantly Hindu country, and you're an open-minded person who's read a lot and who's traveled a lot and who's studied a lot.
Yes.
What do you think is the purpose of life, according to you, and what are your beliefs?
Okay, I will, since you did bring up a little bit, I am an atheist. I think my parents aren't that religious anyway, and they're more agnostic, I guess. I think my dad and mom are more Hindus, but I have not been a good Hindu over time. And plus, I went through the whole rebellious phase of, why do I need God, blah, blah, blah. But the more I read, the more I've been very fortunate to know a lot. Like, I know you grew up Muslim. I know a couple of other friends who are Christians, Hindu. And the more I learned from them and the more I realized that I did not agree with a lot of what I was taught as a kid. So I just kind of discarded it, I guess, to put it as mildly as possible. And when it comes to the question of is there a meaning to life, I do not know. I do not want to say that. I don't want to give a conclusive answer by saying that I think there is or I think there isn't. I do not know if such a thing exists. I prefer to be more nihilistic, follow Nietzsche. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. I don't really care. Just enjoy life as I can right now. Do what I can, do what I need to. Yeah, be a good human being, whatever that means.
I think we've touched upon the slightly dry and the heavy stuff, and now I'd like to get into the next segment, as you would like to call, or whatever you like to call it, because I'm very excited for this one.
Sure.
So you're one of the few people that I can, with utmost certainty, say has outwatched or regularly outwatches me when it comes to TV shows and movies. Also, we read a lot. That's another thing that we have in common.
I actually haven't been reading as much nowadays, but yeah, I try.
But the major difference is that you read a lot of fiction and I read a lot of non-fiction.
Okay.
So you're you're the person that recommended one of the TV shows and books that I really like now, the Foundation series by Isaac Asimov. And recently I watched Dune, which you already obviously know about because you've read the books.
I just read it after I watched the movie, but I need to read more about the rest of the series and stuff.
Okay, and the other day we were discussing why fiction is good and why, So I'd just like to go back to that a little bit. And so what is it about reading and fiction in particular that makes it so appealing in your opinion, and why more people should try it?
So, okay, to answer that, I will ask you this question. What is it about nonfiction that you like? I feel like I've been talking too much, so
I'm so stumped right now. So for me, books are like having a conversation with people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the entire purpose of this podcast is to listen and to learn, because people always listen with the intent of responding or reacting, right? Yeah. So for me, books are a gateway to knowledge. For me, knowledge is the ultimate purpose of life. Okay. If you gave me a choice and if I had my way, the ultimate purpose of my life and any life would be, it sounds insane and I sound like a supervillain, but it's to know everything there is to know. For me, in order to do something, it is very important to understand the how, the why, the when, the where. And it's really absurd to me that we're born into this world, we're born into this giant floating rock, and we're specks of dust, and we give ourselves so much importance, and the things that we do so much importance, yet we're in the grand scheme of things, our lifetimes, which we give so much importance to, are not even a blink when it comes to eternity. And it's crazy because death, okay, so there are only two things that are common to everyone, every living creature.
Death, taxes.
Death, taxes, and death, I was going to say death and differences, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And yet we cannot say, like, okay, where we read a lot of, I read a lot of non-fiction because I'm a believer of science. But at the same time, I believe it's important to maintain a balance and not get carried away. Because in my opinion, the definition of magic is just science that we haven't understood yet. Because if you go back in time and give a phone to a caveman, he will think it's magic. He doesn't know the principles and the fundamentals of how it works and why it works. And I'm rambling and I completely forgot your question.
The idea is, why non-fiction? What is it?
So non-fiction really helps me understand the way the world works, every aspect of the world in how it works.
Okay.
And that is why I gravitate a little bit more towards non-fiction.
Okay.
Otherwise, because it becomes very there are some days where it used to become very difficult for me to get up in the morning, because when you read so much philosophy and non-fiction, it's like we are, for me it's like we're just specks of dust. We come from the mud and we're going to go from the mud, and we're so inconsequential, we're so insignificant, and we give ourselves so much importance. Nothing that we do makes sense in the grand scheme of things. So it became very difficult for me to get myself out of bed in the morning.
Okay.
So that's why non-fiction gives me that opportunity. And yeah, now I'd like to flip the script.
Yeah, no, that's a good answer. And honestly, it is commendable that non-fiction does help you answer a lot of questions that you might have regarding the world. I would take a little bit of a point to non-fiction, as you pointed out. I think you read mostly science and stuff. The beauty of science is that it can be explained, and I guess that's where you mean by non-fiction. But where it kind of lacks is it is very descriptive about the now. A lot of non-fiction will talk about things up to now. The beauty of science fiction especially is that it takes a concept that we might not have thought about and adds a more philosophical element to it, and basically makes you think about things in a lot more ways that you might not consider before. Take Isaac Asimov. The entire idea of iRobot is that what would we do in a world where there is another sort of life? We've never had life at the same level. How would we react to that? Can we even call that life? What does it mean to have life? Philosophy in that sense, not just philosophy, but ideas that really challenge the way you think. That's one of the beauties of science fiction itself. When you look at fantasy and stuff, it's less about teaching you things, but to create a story, and sort of, for me at least, it appeals to that kind of primal, I've forgotten who mentioned it, but there's this sort of primal urge that almost every human beings have to sit by a campfire and hear stories. The oldest books known to man are all fiction. When you look at mythologies like Mahabharata, Ramayana, you look at the Iliad and the Odyssey, you look at Enkidu and what's the guy's name? I've forgotten, the Babylonians and stuff that they have. The Gilgamesh, sorry, that's the one. These are primarily fiction because that's what entrances us. This shared experience that we can come together and talk about something larger than us and more grand. And of course, you can add your own sort of teachings and philosophies to it to give you a more mythologized version of things. But it also helps us remind us of what we are as humans or as animals, or however you want to look at it. Yeah, nonfiction teaches us so much more and is very useful in general. But fiction answers certain different questions. So having both is beneficial to us. Yeah, and I would be interested to see why, or sort of what kind of fiction you do end up picking up if you do, because we live at a really good time in this point of history where we have almost everything available to us, and there's bound to be something that you will find interesting, stimulating, as well as refreshing that nonfiction doesn't scratch that itch.
In fact, I agree with most of what you said. Also because it was Albert Einstein who said that logic will take you from point A to point B, but imagination will take you anywhere and everywhere. I hope I'm not misquoting him, which I think I am. Okay. But anyway, I think fiction is an escape in reality, especially science fiction.
I think the escape is a part of it, but not essentially what encompasses it. It does provide an escape in terms of, if you look at the more fantastical elements of it, yeah, but fiction can appeal to so much more trauma and stuff where more heartbreak can come through fiction. That's not necessarily an escape, just a different view of what is life. So saying escape, I feel, is a bit of a, I don't know, kind of hamstrings the definition quite a bit.
Okay. So there are a few fictional series that I really enjoy, but in your opinion, since you've read way more than I have, especially when it comes to fiction,
I don't know.
What are your top books or series and why?
Oh God, let's see. do you want based on like different genres or? Okay, so I'll give you like science fiction. You've mentioned Asimov, Arthur C. Clarke, the science is indistinguishable from magic. That quote, I'm butchering that, but he is the one who coined that. You have Kurt Vonnegut as well, fantastic author, and so influential in life nowadays. You have Ursula Le Guin, also another fantasy author who's just mind-boggling amount of text that you can read. I really like fantasy, so I would recommend, Lord of the Rings. Having the name Rohan also kind of helps, but the way you're looking, there's a place in the book called Rohan.
I know what you're talking about.
So Lord of the Rings is beautiful. C.S. Lewis, obviously. And if you want to look more contemporary stuff, you have Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman. Good Omens, the TV shows also just came out, and it's really, really funny and just so thought-provoking. I'm missing a lot of people. I haven't read a lot of fantasy stuff lately, but there's quite a lot.
So if I had to, sorry to interject, just to help you out, I would say some of the top fiction series that I have read, Harry Potter definitely up there. The Dune announced.
Yes, Dune as well.
Dune, definitely. Yeah. Gonna get into it. Haven't started reading the books yet, but will definitely. Artemis Fowl.
Yeah, it's good young adult stuff. Yeah.
But the Bartimaeus trilogy, slightly underrated and not that well known. Eragon. What else? I feel like you're right.
So that is very good young fiction stuff. I think moving to a more young adult stuff. I think moving to a more adult kind of field is there is this sort of idea that it does get into a more escapist thing, or you have to go very high fantasy, Brandon Sanderson, Tolkien level stuff. You have to go like the other direction of J.R.R. Martin. You got to go gore and that kind of thing. But there is a wide field of authors in between whose names I cannot remember at the moment that will appeal to you in whatever way that you are looking for. So yeah, sorry.
Also because the person who was majorly responsible for this podcast and behind the camera always said that entertainment is something that is timeless and it will be there. Like humans will look for some form of entertainment, which fiction is primarily. Till the end of time.
That's the thing that helped form communities way back when, and it definitely will in the future as well. So,
shifting from books to finally TV shows and movies. Again, something that we share in common. What would you say are your top TV shows or movies of all time?
Oh my God, it's way too. I cannot give you a list because I'm blanking.
Just at the top of your head,
Of all time is a bit of a hard question. I can give you names that I've really enjoyed these past few years. Let's see. If you want science fiction stuff, Westworld season 1 I think is one of my favorite pieces of TV of all time. So very good science fiction. Again, Michael Crichton is a brilliant author, and adapting that was interesting, and Anthony Hopkins, amazing actor. Let's see. Give me other genres I can think of.
Breaking Bad. I've watched
Breaking Bad, obviously. Better Call Saul as well. I haven't watched Better Call Saul, but I know it's doing really well.
Game of Thrones.
Oh my God, Game of Thrones. I feel bad talking about it, but I have read the books up till whenever Winds of Winter comes out. But season 1 to 4 was good. By the time they started changing too many things,
Rick and Morty. I love Rick and Morty.
So I'm actually Rick and Morty is good. I'm actually a very big fan of
South Park?
No, Dan Harmon's other creation, Community.
Community, of course. We both love Community.
Yeah. In terms of comedy, Community I think is one of my favorite. Just in terms of
very meta, very self-aware.
Yeah, just the way he writes characters and stuff.
Abed, Troy.
No, just Jeff himself. Actually, very very interesting. And if you have the time, watch some of his other. Other
what
stuff.
Are some of Dan Harmon's other works? So I know he's
not in terms of
graphic novels. What was that? Sorry to interrupt, but there was a graphic novel that he wrote recently, or
I will have to check. But I'm talking more about stuff like Harmon Quest and Harmontown, which is Harmontown is kind of his. I don't know if you can call it a podcast, but I mean, it kind of is, but he's talking and he has a bunch of guests and stuff. And just watching his manner of thinking and the way he approaches topics is very interesting. And Harmon Quest is when they made a D&D campaign with him and his friends. And his ideas and the way he looks at his story and characters, I think, is very, very refreshing. So stuff that they also reference in Rick and Morty as well. But yeah, it's very good.
What I've seen is a lot of people are hesitant or have certain misconceptions or preconceived notions about animated stuff.
Yes.
When in fact, what we watch a lot of anime. And
I want to shout this aloud. BoJack Horseman. Please watch as much as you can. I've been trying to get my parents to watch. Nobody seems to want to watch it.
So I watched a few seasons.
Yes.
I liked it, but I wouldn't say it's...
It's definitely an acquired taste.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I really like it is it does character study in a very interesting way. And rather than sort of treating characters as disposable or one note, you see characters change over the course of a season or a few episodes. And I was also going through some stuff in my life where I could sort of resonate with certain characters and the way they interacted with the world. And unfortunately, Netflix did kind of cut it short. But I think in those 6 seasons of TV, you could get a very good story that wasn't necessarily being done in normal TV. But also the writing and the jokes and the way they approach certain topics are absolutely fantastic. I can give some references that I won't do on camera or whatever, but some of the episodes are insanely funny and incredibly well written that you gotta watch it once and you just burst out laughing once you get it. But yeah, it's easily one of my top pieces of TV, I think, in the last 10 years or ever, really. So.
And then in anime, there's Attack on Titan and Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood.
Yes, both brilliant shows. I've read both of them.
One Punch Man.
Yes, absolutely. I was hoping season 3 comes out soon.
My Hero Academia. Are you
yes, I do read and watch it. I haven't seen the newest episodes because I'm reading. I've already covered all of that. But yeah, it's.
And then there's classics like Death Note.
Yeah, Death Note is good. I'll shout out a couple of newer ones. There's Jujutsu Kaisen, which is also on Netflix if you want to watch. Very good. There is... What other good anime that I've been... Arcane is not technically anime, but animated. It's supposed to be very good. I haven't seen it.
Assassination Classroom. Have you
As
heard
Class,
of that?
yes, it's good. I should not say the word As Class, but yeah, it's also very fun.
And then there's other things like Dragon Ball Z. I don't know how many people...
Iconic, yeah.
Love Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah. Anime has... It's very refreshing to see India, come up to anime and become very open to this kind of thing. Hopefully, India also kind of develops its own market, a studio, and come up with a lot of interesting stories. But yeah, anime is a very important thing that I don't think most people kind of give enough credit to. Yeah. Hopefully more people will be open to it, I guess, in the future.
Okay, this reminds me of a question that I had intended to ask you earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned science fiction.
Yes.
And so I remembered that, in the future, we're going to be mostly likely reaching what is known as a singularity, where we will create AI that will probably equal or surpass us in intellect, and we don't know what the consequences or ramifications of that will be. In fact, Dune, you've not read the book, but in the future, spoilers for those who don't want to know, that the reason why the Dune universe or the world is the way it is that because they reached the singularity and they had a war, the humans and machines had a war, and then they made a decision that there will be no more machines.
Yep.
Intelligent machines, So, I forgot to ask you this. Since you're studying biology and science is ultimately almost the same thing, because what is... No, it is.
No, I know. I'm just thinking of
because the
jokes that I've seen about it.
Yeah, like if you go down to it, everything at a molecular level is atoms and molecules and electrons, protons and quarks, and then we go into physics. And anyway, I think you get my point, right? Yeah. That what do you think is the future of biology and widely science in maybe, let's say, the next 5, 10, 20 years, and if you could give us a little bit about your thoughts on when we're going to achieve singularity and
that's a whole other question itself.
Let's take it step by step.
Let's take it step by step.
Yeah.
Biology in the next 5 years, I don't think will be that significantly different as the way we live now. Most easily accessible biology that you and I, or not you and I, but the common person meets, usually comes in the form of medication, or comes in the form of the ecology and the environment, the world around them. And in terms of those, I think COVID has shown us that we are learning so much more about viruses and technologies and how they affect human life. And we will see a lot of improvements, hopefully, as to how we react to a new pandemic if there is one in the near future. So in terms of medical sciences, I think that's the one I know of, at least. I'm not well versed enough to talk about actual changes in the way we look at medicine, because I don't quite know enough about that. But the other thing I was talking about was the ecology. Global warming is the thing that's going to kill us all, probably. Not to be too pessimistic about it, but yeah, things need to change. I don't know if they are changing quickly enough. I don't know if they're going to change in the next 5 to 10 years at all. But in terms of shifting to cleaner sources of energy, being more sustainable and careful about how we interact with the natural resources present at the moment, that's going to be, I think, the biggest challenge of the next 10 to 20 years. To expand it larger to science, I think space travel is going to be one of the bigger things. I don't know, again, how much of an effect stuff like SpaceX and Blue Origin will have. It is good to see that the space race is being continued. I'm still a bit pessimistic about it because it is being done mainly through corporations rather than a governmental effort. NASA is renewing its Artemis mission, and I think they're trying to move in 2023 or 24 or whenever to go back to the moon. And China is already, getting a base set up on the dark side of the moon. So interplanetary stuff hopefully will be good. The Hubble telescope has also just come out and getting some beautiful images for it. I don't know if you've seen that, but from the more cosmology side of things, I think we are moving well, but I don't know how much is well enough. I think our current climate crisis and human crisis, rather, is going to be what's dominating the news cycle for the next 5 years or so. So I'm optimistic, but I want to be realistic. I don't think we will reach singularity in the next 10, 15 years. I don't know about an AI that will be, what's the right word? I guess self-aware enough to be a challenge to humans. So far, most parts of AI that I've seen have ended horribly. And as much as it is an interesting scientific topic, it is going to be such a big philosophical and legal issue that's going to be I think a topic for the next 20 years, not now at the moment. But maybe I don't know that much about computer science to give you a good answer to that, I guess.
Talking about AI and the fact that we're going to reach singularity, God knows when, and what are the consequences or ramifications of that. There are a few TV shows and movies, especially, and even comic books, the ones that everyone knows about, Marvel. And I don't know if you watched What If by the latest.
I kind of missed it, but yeah.
I think you should watch it because they explore, things like the butterfly effect and how a small change can lead to a drastic ending in a universe. And they explore the possibility of that we're living in a multiverse, and they explore
that's
good. So however, there's a reason why I'm rambling about this. It's because every time that an AI has become self-aware, it has reached the conclusion that humans are bad, and that the only way to
I should point out that
long-lasting
in terms of fiction, yes, that's always how it's kind of gone.
Take Age of Ultron, for instance, Marvel.
To that I would point out I don't know how much into detail I can go onto this in this podcast, but I think Microsoft tried to build its own AI chatbot a couple of years ago. And I think after 24 hours, because of the data, I don't know what kind of data they used, but I think they let it go on Twitter and stuff. Rather than kind of hating humans, it just became insanely racist. So we do ignore the sort of human element of it, where the it's gonna kind of read our texts and what we post on Facebook and stuff, and it's not gonna hate us. It's just gonna become another one of us, and that's just gonna be.
And I think tone can't be conveyed through text, right? So I think the nuances of
that too. But I think our problem isn't an AI hating us. It's just the sheer amount of data and garbage that it has to kind of sift through to even become smart enough. We kind of have some time to not worry about it, and hopefully the people, I know the people smart enough to make this thing will already have this in mind. My biggest worry when it comes to AI is obviously the first thing is that it will be used for some kind of governmental control. We all know that if it's marketable, it's going to be used against people, and that's the biggest issue. And secondly, it's the question of how much influence will it have on a day-to-day person's life. If you look at stuff like in the US, they used facial recognition technology for driving licenses, or not just driving violations, but kind of any sort of databases that they have. It's the kind of data that you input that'll give you a good result, and it's the data that we're inputting is very inherently biased towards a certain demographic of people. You look at China and the way they are incorporating technology, it is more towards governmental control. AI, I think, is one of those things that is going to become a tool for a lot more control than it is going to be open access use. And it's not going to be, genocide to humans as much as it is, you can't go here, don't do this. So I don't know if AI is that big of a specter that people think it is. It definitely can be if, gone unchecked. But we have time, so.
Okay. Also, since you're coming from the science and the medical or biological field or sector, industry, whatever you like to call it, do you find it remarkable that someone like Bill Gates predicted that we would not be that we would have a pandemic and we wouldn't be ready for one?
So Bill Gates was basically going off what other scientists said. So I personally was not surprised. One of the big things you learn about in school, or at least evolutionary biology, one of the first examples that they teach you about adaptation is an old Harvard experiment where they took a bunch of bacteria and they laid out on a plate, and they kind of demarcated areas of increasing concentrations of antibiotics. And there's a time-lapse video, and you can slowly see this small bacteria kind of moving forward but then dying because it doesn't have the antibiotic resistance. But then one kind of survives, that starts spreading, then it moves to the next area, but then that dies because the concentration's increased. And slowly by slowly there is an antibiotic-resistant bacteria that makes its way all the way through. So it's always been an idea that we kind of knew about. Even when Fleming created penicillin, the markets suddenly became flooded with penicillin kind of based drugs, and it was always an issue that this is not a permanent solution. It's always the evolutionary arms race of we have something that works, but something else will survive against it, so we need to create something else that will work. It's never been a surprise as to the fact that there would be some kind of pandemic. We look at the 1910s, where the Spanish flu was the biggest pandemic of the time. We look at some time before that, there were other pandemics, the plague, way back when, that decimated, European civilization. So it was more of a question of when and how would we react. I think what took us by surprise was the manner of which, by it spread so quickly, we underestimated how much humans have been able to travel and spread so quickly. So COVID spreading from China to wherever else in the world was very surprising. We also didn't realize how stupid people are. Like,
I think
you would never expect such a large anti-science population to form so quickly, and it's disheartening to see that. It's disheartening to see people I know kind of say stupid things.
That's again the human mind and its tendency to lean and believe conspiracy theories. And
I think it's a mixture of fear and ignorance, and fear in the obvious sort of thing of, I don't know what this is, and I don't want to change my life so much, so why should I believe that this is there? Ignorance, because I think we've taken science as this sort of, we've kind of put it on a pedestal and idolized it as this, you have to be smart to do science, where you realize that everything in our day-to-day life involves some amount of science. You don't have to be smart, but it just requires a bit of time and understanding to do it. And it's just easier to click like on Facebook and just believe whatever you want.
Right.
So, yeah.
And that's the thing about an opinion. An opinion is the lowest form of knowledge, and everyone has one.
Yeah. I hope things will change in the future. Looking at our current, the current way many people think, I'm not so sure. But yeah.
Okay, so we've discussed a lot of things so far. And finally, I'd like to get to something that, again, I've been very excited for, because you could call us geeks or nerds. But it's going to be the future, and it's something that we share in common, and that is our love for video games. And so, yeah, like, let's just start with what are some of the video games that you've grown up with?
I've grown up with. Okay. My first video game that I got was Pokemon Yellow. This was back in, when I was 6 or 7. I got a Game Boy Advance, started playing Pokemon Yellow. Loved it. Also, whereas the first place where I learned the word evolution, because Pokemon evolve. Not that it affected my biology, but yeah, it's a really fun game. Over time, I guess, growing up in India, because internet connection was a rarity back in those days, so going to gaming cafes and playing Counter-Strike and stuff was always fun with everybody, and FIFA at somebody's house. But nowadays, I've kind of tended to move towards more single-player stuff. Because of my academic situation, I've kind of moved from place to place, so I don't have a desktop. I just have a laptop, and I've recently upgraded to now where I can play, good AAA kind of titles. I've spent... Hopefully my parents aren't watching this, but I've spent way too long playing Dota 2. That's my main game. Currently, I'm enjoying Destiny 2 as well. It's in the best place that it's been in quite a while. I've also kind of been a fan of finding these smaller indie games, that cost very little but provide so much more interactivity.
Have you played Goat Simulator?
I have played Goat Simulator. A lot of fun. It's a good way to waste a couple of hours, but... yeah, I think one indie game that I'm playing right now that is quite unlike a lot of games that I'm playing is called Sable. It is a beautiful sort of 3D cel-shaded graphic kind of thing where there is no goal. Really, the journey is the game where you do different things and you are in control. There is no map marker. You have things to do, but you can do them at your own pace. So yeah, I should not have so much free time. I will not in the future. But yeah, this is what I've been doing at the moment.
Fun fact, Pokemon is the highest grossing franchise of all time.
Yep.
Also, I think it's a good thing that you have so much free time. And I think this is something that
depends on who you ask.
I think I wanted you to tell our viewers that a lot of your work involves waiting, right? For
yes.
cultures to...
No, so I don't use microbes, but I have mosquitoes, and I do a lot of behavioral stuff, and that requires me sitting down in a basement waiting for stuff to happen. So I always have either music or a podcast or something going on in the background when I wait. So.
Okay. So I don't know if a lot of people know this, but gaming is going to be the future. In fact, it is
we are
a pretty
at the
big
moment.
industry right now, especially with how cheap phones have become and how many phones have flooded the market.
Yep.
The availability and accessibility to good internet, fast internet.
India is I think has one of the cheapest data connections in anywhere in the world, and that's brilliant.
That was because Jio came and disrupted the market.
Yeah.
And I think India alone has around 1 billion smartphones, if I'm not mistaken.
I wouldn't be surprised.
And yeah, it's one of the most popular games. You definitely know because we've discussed this before. Is Garena Free Fire?
I have not played it, but yes, I know.
It is, and I was surprised because I was doing a little bit of research regarding the gaming industry in general, and I just typed top 10 most popular games of now and of all time, and one of the games that popped up was Garena Free Fire, and I'd never heard of it, but apparently it's free to play and it's very popular, especially in the Southeast Asian region. And yeah, so we've spoken about some of the games that you're into right now, but what would you say are some of your favorite games of all time and consoles as well?
Okay, for consoles, I had a Game Boy Advance. I had a Nintendo Wii. I currently have a Nintendo Switch. And I had a 3DS as well. So
you want a PS5?
No, that's just if it's available and I have the free time. Yeah, I like the PS5 for also a lot of the technical standpoints of a lot of stuff. But video games at the moment are in a very good place where all you kind of need is a laptop with good, or a computer with good internet connection, and Xbox has Game Pass, which allows you to play a whole library of games that span multiple generations as well. And
backwards compatibility.
Yep, that too.
And how science is moving towards singularity, gaming is moving towards VR.
One VR game that I really want to play, I don't think I will anytime soon, is Half-Life Alyx, which was released by Valve, and it is the best VR game I think created. It was a couple of years ago when it released, and I won't bore you with the details, but it showcases what a true VR game can be. I don't think we are quite there yet, and I'm not sure if we will even move towards that sort of future. VR still seems to be a bit niche, I think, probably because of availability, connection, a lot of other factors behind that. But it is a very interesting possibility, and sort of similarly related to that is AR, because Pokemon Go is huge, and it showed all you really need is a smartphone and some very good ideas. And the same company actually released another one of Nintendo's IP called Pikmin Go, and that's also doing very well. So it's interesting. It's a great time to be a gamer. Not if you're in school.
It's a great time to be alive in general.
Yeah.
Good consoles, good hardware, good software, good internet, cheap. Everything's
unfortunately
quite
because of the semiconductor shortage. There are a bit of a lack of good graphic card available and stuff.
And that's because of crypto and mining.
Not just that. I mean, COVID also kind of decimated a lot of the
because of the supply chain. And
crypto is not helping out at all.
Yeah.
But sorry, to go back to your question of some of my favorite games of all time. This is a genuinely hard question because I think it's a bit apples and oranges in certain cases. I would say Pokemon is one of my favorite ones, primarily because I have the nostalgia for it, even though the most recent releases haven't been as good. Dota is a fantastic game and easily one of the best gaming experiences I've ever had, but it is not a game I would recommend to anybody because of the sheer time investment that you need to put into it just to even get good. I've put in 3,000 hours, I'm still not good. I don't think I will become good at the game. So I don't think I have a favorite of all time, as bad as an answer that is.
What about some of the games that we've played together? CSGO
is
FIFA.
I haven't played FIFA in a long time actually. I don't know anybody that has it, and if anybody is paying attention to a lot of the news about EA and the way they are releasing FIFA, it is not in a good position. But I still remember sleepovers at somebody's place and playing FIFA with everybody. It's a lot of fun.
And then there's the new battle royales, and there's GTA, of course.
GTA is good. I don't think GTA 6 is coming out anytime soon.
WWE SmackDown vs. Raw and all of those PS1 and PS2 and PS3 titles.
Yeah, good memories of that.
Yeah.
But the joy of playing with somebody, couch co-op is...
Yeah, that's the problem. So split screen games are no longer being preferred by developers, not only because nobody's playing them, like everybody's playing from their own consoles, and also because it reduces the quality, the graphics.
I disagree with that. There are some really good split screen games that are still available.
I love split screen
and very popular.
Like in fact, the last split split screen game that I really enjoyed was on the PS3, Call of Duty Black Ops 2 Zombies.
You are missing out on a lot of more recent stuff. I think some of the joy of it's not exactly split screen, but couch co-op style stuff. I got my parents to play Overcooked. If you play,
I love Overcooked. I have Overcooked 1 and 2. Yes, definitely love Overcooked.
I have Overcooked.
In fact, I'm glad you brought it up because I completely forgot about it, and it's something that anybody can pick up so quickly.
I managed to get my parents to actually listen to me and play with it, and it's
in fact that's why I think the Wii was so successful, because of how easy it is for just anyone and everyone to play, and the amount of games. In fact, fact, it was that one Wii Resort.
Wii Sports Resort, yeah.
That had so many games.
Yeah.
And there are so many memes about the game and the characters and the gameplay in general, even today. Yeah, so...
Yeah. It's definitely shifted a bit in terms of not being couch co-op or split screen or whatever, but playing multiplayer has become so much more convenient nowadays. And yeah, there are a lot of games that I would recommend even to first-time players. And not just, one of the things I'm also trying to get more people aware of is that video games at the moment I think video games are art for a very different reason that a lot of people might consider what is art. And if a lot more people are open to it, they can find an experience that no other form of media can really give them, in terms of not just a story or an experience that they can have, but something that actively challenges them to experience. A book will continue regardless of whether you're paying attention or not. A movie has a definite runtime. But a video game stops when you put down the controller. The story does not progress. So it demands a certain attention from you, as well as opening you up to experiencing something certainly that very few other forms of media can actually give you. Whether you want the more heartfelt things of like a Last of Us, which is a very story-driven game, but at its core, a very human story. Or if you have like a Journey, which is, there are no words, but just the music and the environment around you can transport you and tell you a very basic story of the hero with 1,000 faces.
Five Nights at Freddy's.
If you want horror, yeah. Sure. That's
Shadow of the Colossus.
Uncharted. Yeah, Uncharted as well. And you see that Hollywood is now kind of using some of these video game stories as well to become movies, and they do
Far Cry.
They do it badly. Far Cry as well is a good example. And
Star Wars, the amount of Star Wars games that have come out, and some of them are quite good.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. And there was actually a couple announced last week, the video game awards. But yeah, it's there is so much more to video games, and obviously with the current generation being more receptive to it, I think the idea that video games are this thing that will need people with glasses sitting in basements playing.
I think we're moving, as we all know, into the metaverse, where there'll be an intersection.
I do not like the metaverse at all, primarily because I do not like Mark Zuckerberg, but please don't kill me. I think the metaverse is an interesting concept.
I think there's going to be an intersection and conjunction of movies, TV shows,
absolutely.
books, real life, merchandise.
So to give you an example of that, The Mandalorian, one of the most famous TV shows of the last few years, the way they've shot The Mandalorian is a very interesting viewing thing. If you have the time, please check it out. But the backgrounds are not a traditional green screen backgrounds. What they've done is they've used a sort of 360, not exactly 360 degree LED sort of panels, and simulated the entire universe or the surroundings using the Unreal.
Like a video game.
No, using the
Almost
very specific. Using that exact engine, the Unreal Engine 5, and there is a bit of a documentary about it where you can see, and a lot of what the director realized is that the customizability of using a video game engine can create something very true to life, but also malleable and not as frustrating to film. And that's just one of the small places where video game technology is actively helping push the boundaries of film and media. So it's a very, very good time to sort of be a nerdy side of technology sciences as well. So yeah.
Also, I'd like to take this opportunity to give an example regarding Overwatch and Overwatch 2 also, because it's my favorite game. I think I have more than 100 games, and yet that's the only game I play on console and PC. I was watching a behind the scenes shoot of how they the voice lines, how they generate the voice lines for all the characters, and how they use the sound effects. So for Overwatch, there's a character called Soldier 76 where they go to a very specific valley and with a very specific gun, and then they record it, and that's how they. So it's very interesting, and it's a great time to be a geek, and in fact it's become cool now to be someone who's a nerd or a geek per se.
And then when you look at like the visuals, you look at the music side of things. You look at.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but this reminds me. You recommended a great YouTube channel that regarding the music.
I'm probably the only person I know who listens to this kind of stuff, but Austin Wintry is a music composer who's done stuff for Journey, for Abzu and most recently The Pathless, and he's done a bunch of other stuff as well. And he's got a podcast called You Gotta Hear This, which is him talking to video game voice actor Troy Baker. And the way Austin structures the podcast is because of his sort of classical background, taking an example of a certain movie or a certain TV show or whatever it is, and breaking down the way the music is structured. I don't really know much about music, but having that explained in such a beautiful way coming from somebody who I know has a very similar sort of background in terms of thinking about it. It's a very good podcast. Would recommend. I don't know if I can do it on somebody else's podcast.
No, definitely. I mean,
but yeah. So music is evolving and changing in incredible ways that, video games have helped push it into a new level, I guess.
Also, a wise person once said that 60% of all cinema and all visuals TV shows are mostly music, and 40% is the rest. So.
Yeah. Music can help, give so much more life and color to something on screen. So.